So everyone that is here for the addiction talk today? Okay, great. I'm Debbie Trent. I'm from Tampa, Florida now. And this is Barnett Gilmer, my ex-boss. And I guess first of all, maybe just run through, let everybody briefly introduce themselves, and then maybe get an idea of what you'd like to get from this addiction topic today. How's that sound? Way to start? Pam?
Pam Gibson from Charlottesville. My drug of choice is sugar.
I'm with you there.
So I'd really, and it seems to be in, I'm eating it before I even go, oh wait, so that's why I'm here, to talk about that. I mean, just talk about addiction, coming from anyway.
Okay. And the speaker that we have the mic up here should pick everyone up, is what I was told. So, Mark, I guess?
Yes, hi, I'm Mark Iskowitz from New York City area. And I guess what I was kind of looking to hear about is how this is, the Three Principles approach is getting out into the world of, addiction treatment, and what are some of the sort of pitfalls in getting it out there, and what are some of the things that are working and not working.
I'm Kat Allen. I also work at Gulf Breeze Recovery, and I have a background both experiencing addiction and then also working on the other side of it in the helping profession as well. And I'm just happy to be here and let what emerges emerge, and hopefully get a deeper understanding of something.
My name is Christian from Pensacola area. I myself am in recovery. Just to further bring in new aspects of kind of understanding the applications of the principles to my recovery.
I'm Colin, Orange Beach, Alabama, much like these two, in recovery myself. So I would like to just get a better understanding of how to share this actually with others as well, especially those within my inner circle and other communities.
Come in.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Judge Meyer, and I'm from West Virginia. And there's a couple things that I'm interested in this session. And one of mine is a little bit different. I'm a parent of an addicted individual who was recovered, and my state is very poor, if you will, and addiction is very strong. And so I'm also interested in the facility side of it, because it's very difficult for me. I've worked in prevention many years, and people don't want to hear about different ways of doing things in my area. So I don't know if that's something that people could share. It's like the principles, it seems so simple, but it's not when you try to tell them that.
For the newcomers in the room, we are recording. If you don't want the camera on you, just raise your hand and I won't flash it back towards you.
I'm Sharon Gilmer, and I'm just here to listen. Support Marie.
Okay, I'm Leona Hamrick. I was actually the transitional care coordinator for a good while at Gulf Breeze. I've taught 3Ps on and off for about 10 years now. I've stepped down from that position, but been involved in substance abuse in different settings, prison settings at Gulf Breeze, and just really, and I would challenge, and please don't raise your hand, that all of us have been affected by this in some way with a family member or somebody that we care about. So I would like to hear more about how can we discuss this with the people that we love.
That's you. I'm Jacqueline Hollows, and I teach people who have addictions and other mental health issues and so on in the criminal justice system in England. And I've been teaching for in that population for about 4 years, but I don't know enough about addiction. And actually, I never teach about addiction, so I'm really interested in having the conversation and hearing what other people are doing and sharing those things. And I'd really like to talk about being able to talk to not the people I'm teaching about what's occurring from a language that they'll understand.
Hi, I'm Rob Hollows. I work with Jacqueline in Beyond Recovery and what we do in the criminal justice system. But a few years ago, I worked with the homeless in an area of London which had a high incidence of addiction behaviour with drugs and alcohol. And I'm just very interested to know what the perspective is, not just from the UK, but also from the States and elsewhere, how we can treat this and talk it and make sure that it isn't under rug swept, that it's part of everybody's lives and can be effective accordingly.
My name's Ron McFitty. I came to start this conversation, had some big enlightened moments about 3 years ago. And I'm really curious as to how this conversation applies to addiction, so that's why I signed up.
My name's Brad, and from time to time, I've participated in addiction recovery groups in my church, and mostly being there for others, but also benefiting for myself. And so I'm interested in what's been said about the implications of the principles in this, like in the real world, in working with people with addictions. I'm also personally interested in understanding better what is an addiction from a three principles perspective. Is that, like I've dealt with perfectionism, is that in the same realm? Could it be, like, what distinguishes an addiction from other things that people deal with?
Hi, my name is Chris. And starting at the age 14 until just a number of years ago, I never went a day in my life without drugs of some kind in my system at all times, and alcohol. And I'm trying to get my mind and my heart around a sort of a concept that keeps coming to me, and that is, and I know so many young people that are no longer, that have died over the last few years. And probably most of us have. Because I've been in so many 12-step meetings, you know, I look at a lot of empty seats that have young people in them. And yet, you can go to just about any city in this country, and probably throughout the world, and walk into a 12-step meeting for free. It's not like I necessarily, the three principles has brought to me a new light on how I see addiction. And I'm just, at this point, maybe just scratching the surface and wondering, how do we get on the street corner? Or if that's even possible. The accessibility with no cost is something that's in my mind every day.
I'm Ann. I'm from the Charlottesville area. I'm affiliated with AA, and I'm interested in how this can be useful in that arena.
Get everyone. All right, looks like we've got our job cut out. I did this part, you.
All right.
You can do it.
Tackle them one at a time.
She wrote them all down.
Okay, let's just start out for a second. What do you think addiction is? What's your definition? Doesn't have to be textbook. That's not what we're looking for. What do you think addiction means?
I have it.
Okay.
Obsessive thought.
Obsession coupled with compulsion.
I think there's two kinds. I think there's physical addiction, when your body's absolutely dependent on a substance. Sometimes withdrawal means death. So I don't know how you verbalize that, but a physical addiction.
A misguided search for happiness.
So I see the opposite of Mark. I see it as an escape from unhappiness.
A solution.
I see numbing emotion.
A solution.
Solution. Anything else?
Denial.
Trying to feel good.
Fear of a genuine experience.
Searching.
Control.
Pretty good list. How many of you know someone that really set out that was their desire to become addicted to something? I don't think you could ever walk into any junior high school and talk to a group of kids and ask them what they want to do when they become adults. I don't think you'd get a single answer that any one of them wants to become addicted to something. That's not anyone's goal. That's not how they plan their lives. So how does it happen so often? I think we've pretty much covered that. Barnett, you've got a definition here. You want to?
Well, it's not my definition.
Okay.
But I think Centers for Disease Control is the definition.
Can you all see that?
Read it because you've got Zoom too.
Okay, you're right. It says addiction is a chronic, relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug-seeking abuse despite harmful consequences. It's pretty harsh. Do you want to?
Well, yeah, just the feeling of that statement is just doesn't feel good.
Kind of hopeless.
Yeah. I always tell people, and my interpretation that, and I say it's mine. I mean, carried over from things that I've heard from other people. But it's an innocent attempt, to find happiness through an outside source, and that innocent attempt leads to a solution. I mean, it's a true solution. Okay, whatever chemical that the person found, and so we keep going back to that solution. Somewhere along the way, the solution has quit working. But the only thing that we know through habit and compulsion is to go back to that solution. And so we continue to go back to that solution because it's all we know. That's it. Through our level of understanding at that particular time in our lives, that's all we know. And so that's where we go. And so, growth as a human being, if you will, mental growth, ceases, or at least slows down for most. Maybe even the ability to have an insight about your situation, a person's situation, may be a little diminished because, of a person get caught up into that cycle. But, it's all we know. And so then we try to maybe white knuckle or whatever, stop the drug use. And then the next thing you know, maybe we change our drug of choice, or maybe we change, our addiction, if you will, whether it be, sex, internet, gambling, whatever it may be. And so I love it. But, Joe Bailey in his book, The Serenity Principle, talks about the antidote to all addictions, is serenity. Finding that deep within ourselves and that peace. And so when we find that, we truly find it through an insightful understanding about how, of our psychological functioning, if you will. Then that is the antidote for changing our drugs of choice. Because we're no longer having an outside, so we're no longer searching outside ourselves for an inside out solution, and which is where addiction really begins, is that search for an inside-out solution through an outside-in means. But, we've been conditioned, most of us anyway, all our lives, through consumerism, through commercials when we're kids watching cartoons, and then that next big toy, it's going to make us happy. We're going to have fun, excitement. We actually get that toy, and then we look at it, we go, is this it? But we keep looking for it, and it gets bigger, and toys get bigger, and then we start going, for relationships, accomplishments, whatever you want to call it. And when we get to that accomplishment and we go, is that it? And we never find it. But it's the same thing with drugs. We get caught up innocently, in this, brought up condition, if you will, in our consumerism, that outside things buy us happiness. And next thing you know, we're going outside for drugs and alcohol. So it's all innocent.
We may want to back up just a little bit and talk about why we're sitting up here instead of back there.
Yeah.
So how did you get into this, this role with addiction treatment?
So, I experienced an addiction problem. It was back in the 80s, and my drug of choice was cocaine. And, hey, when I found that was the stuff. And it was a solution for a long time until it became a problem, obviously. And in fact, I had a slogan. And this is back in the 80s, and my slogan was, I'm going to go straight in 88. So I'd say that slogan, and next thing you know, I'd have the guy come around my work, and I'd lose sight of my slogan. And so it was 89 when I finally quit. And I didn't have a rhyme for that. I want to be fine in 89. But I white knuckled it for a long time, and I didn't realize I was even white knuckling. But once again, searching through relationships, accomplishments. If I'll just go back to school and get my degree, that's it. And so went to work for a rehab facility just by chance. This is the universe working here. But went to work for them for about 6.5 years, and noticed that the people that really you could tell were getting better were those who had an aha moment. Those, when they would talk to me, they'd go, I don't know what happened. We were doing so-and-so, and it just hit me what was going on, and what I'd been doing, and that kind of stuff. And so when we decided, to maybe try it on my own, I wanted to try to find a program that, helped people to see for themselves what was going on. And so I knew one guy that was going into looking for something to change his life. He read about the 3 principles and studied a little bit, and then found out that Debbie and Gina, through Cypress Initiative, was having a seminar, a weekend seminar. And so we went there, and I liked what I heard. She gave a book by Jack Pransky, Somebody Should Have Told Us, and I had read it one full time. And then I was on the second reading, and I had walked that afternoon, and I was on my way home, and all of a sudden, I just got stopped in my tracks, and it was really weird because it seemed like the world got brighter, and I know that was my senses. and that my peripheral vision actually got a little wider. And got, because I was going, wow, this is really weird. But it was like a camera was playing before, my mind. And it was about all the things that I had done, and all the things that had hurt people and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of it, it hit me, that you're insecure, and insecurity has been, the source of your misery, if you will, in the things, been the cause of the things that you have done, in the past, and that it was okay to be insecure. And so with that, I knew that this is what I wanted to do, okay? And this was the type of program that we wanted to run. And I had stayed in contact with Debbie, and she lived in Tampa. I lived up in Pensacola. And it took a 2-year process for the building. And so we kept talking back and forth. And I'm like, you sure you don't want to move up here? And she's like, no, I'm sure. Because she was the only licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida that knew about the 3 principles. And at that time, yeah. And so I was trying to figure out how to make it work, because we had to have a clinical director. And obviously you want a clinical director that knows the program. And so finally we sealed the deal on the building, and Debbie and Leona came up and checked it out. And about a week later, Debbie calls me up and says, you know what, if we can work out the details, I'll move up there. And so she did.
If I can interrupt for just a second, after talking to someone that had a plan, that had a dream, basically, to start this first 3 principle-based treatment center. There had been one several years ago in California that was for ladies, and I think it lost funding or something, but this was the first center that everybody that was involved would be trained in the 3 principles. And to have heard him talk about that for 2 years and then walk into that building, it was like walking into somebody else's dream. It was the most amazing thing tears came to my eyes, because everything in that building was what he had been describing to me that he wanted for a center. And then there it was. And even though I really didn't want to move away from Tampa Bay, I really, really liked Tampa Bay. And I'd never been to the Panhandle before that. That's not even part of Florida.
Right. You're in Alabama.
But just, there was something that made me feel like this was a part of my life that I was meant to do, that this was what the next step was supposed to be. And my husband was agreeable, so we picked up and moved and bought a house in Gulf Breeze and started this wild and crazy adventure. And sometimes I wondered if we were both insane. Still wonder from time to time.
It was definitely a learning experience, no doubt about it, and incorporating this into a treatment modality, if you will. And certainly had some hiccups along the way, because having this in a forum, it's 8 weeks long, 7 to 8 weeks long, versus, just having weekend seminars and that kind of stuff. How do you do all that? And so, that was the challenge. And then just getting people in a position where they're ready to listen. That was the number one challenge. Getting people in a position, because typically in residential rehab, there's very few people that go there that are just dying to go there. There's a few that have risen their hands and said, I give up, but that's a low percentage. Yeah. It's like the, cat, clawing the carpet, coming in there. And so, yeah, we had to try to find a way to where we could get people to at least get them in that position where maybe we can just at least plant a little seed, so that we can get beyond the firewall and let things start to plant so that they can see for their own self, what's going on, through an insight.
And we did do some trial and error and change things around. One of the things that when Sid Banks was having conferences, he would always plan in a lot of downtime. Sid would sit in front of a group and he would talk for an hour and 15 minutes, and then he'd say, folks, I think you've had just about all you need to have for right now. Let's just take us a good little break, and y'all come back in, maybe an hour and a half, and then we'll talk again. And his whole idea, from my understanding, was that he was giving people time to take what they had heard and just allow it to kind of start to make a little sense for them. And he would quite often have the trainings in places that would be off to themselves. Not so that you can walk out to the mall, like, sometimes when we're at conferences and things start to get boring, it's easy to just decide we'll go shopping for an hour or so and come back. But I remember the one that I went to in California that I think was his last full conference, that it was way out. It was a beautiful setting, but it was way out, away from everything. So there wasn't really anything to do when he gave you those hour and a half breaks, other than just maybe get in small groups and talk about it a little or something. So I kept telling Barnett, we've got to find a way that they can have some quiet time, because people that have been addicted, for the most part, aren't used to having quiet minds at all. So what we had came up with was that we would set a certain amount of time aside every day that these folks would read a pre-principle book. They were thrilled. They thought it was a wonderful idea.
They still do.
But the funny thing was that the ones that would fight the hardest at the beginning of this is ridiculous, I don't like to read, I can't stay focused, blah, blah, blah. But they would start to settle down. They would start to have some understandings. They'd start to quote books from time to time. And many of them, by the time they were leaving, were talking about how much they had enjoyed that time. So we were just experimenting with things, trying to make it work. We did have to cut it back a little bit, because I think we started out with an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And we were getting so much pushback from that hour and a half that we cut it to an hour. But the thing is that before I did the work at Gulf Breeze, I had worked for Cypress Initiative for about 3 years, and we were working in the correctional setting then. And it became a part of my talk when I would go into a group of people who were incarcerated, that the first thing I would say is, I'm not here to fix you because you're not broken. Because that was something that would get their attention. Because they had heard all the things about how bad they were and how much they were damaged. And Mark and I actually worked together at that program. And some of them would give me a look like they thought I might be a little bit insane to be coming in there and saying that they weren't broken, but they truly were not broken. And it was a wonderful time in my life when I was doing that kind of work too. But I carried that forward to Gulf Breeze, because people who have been addicted for a while think they are damaged too. And so when you start to tell them they're not, that there's really nothing wrong with you. Yeah, you've been doing some things that have been causing you harm, but that's not who you are. That's not who you are. That's something you've done. When they can start to believe that a little bit, then you can start cracking that shell open, and they hopefully start to settle down so they can see it for themselves. It's easy for us to see it, but it's really hard sometimes for folks who have been fighting addiction to be able to see that they're okay. So it's been an ongoing adventure.
You know, it's funny, pre-insight or whatever, but when people get there, they'll fall into a particular maybe behavioral pattern or, believe a certain story about themselves. And then, they'll have an insight and the next thing you know, we're going, who is this person? Because this person is just, bam, it went from this to this. And, I snapped my fingers, but, in a very short time. It's just amazing when it finally hits them, and they see, wow, I've been doing this to myself all this time and had no earthly idea.
It is like getting to witness miracles on a weekly basis. It was amazing work there. And I learned so much from the people that came there for treatment. It was amazing. So many times they were the teacher and I was the one who was learning. Beautiful, beautiful experience. And probably tomorrow, when we have our last session tomorrow, we'll go over some statistics and that kind of thing. But our recovery rates have been so much higher. It's not 100%. I don't think any treatment program is 100%. But overall, and some of our folks would relapse.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them would come back for a second time. Or some of them would relapse, but then they would, on their own, go back to their health. Because when somebody relapses and they've got this understanding, we tell them before they ever leave, that's not a failure. That doesn't mean that you've forgotten everything you know. You just pick it up from there and go on. And truthfully, what I saw most often with relapses was that people would get out and, maybe it's alcohol. It could be anything. But let's just say it was a person who had a problem with alcohol. And then they would get out and they would be sober for, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And they think, okay, now I can drink responsibly because I'm okay. I can have a glass of wine with dinner. Oh, I had a glass of wine with dinner. That was okay. I didn't have any more problems. I think I'll have a couple of beers after I cut the grass. And before they know it, it's right back to using at the level that they were before. But if that happens and then they learn from that, then they know pretty solidly, no, that's not anything I can play with. It doesn't work well. It didn't work for me. So that's kind of what I saw. That's not 100% of the time, but that's quite often how relapse would happen with our guests.
Yeah, the solution definitely wasn't a solution anymore. I mean, it was solidified. In fact, we've had a lot of people that would tell us we're buzzkills because we took all the, quote fun or whatever out of it. And so they would give it another shot and, it just wasn't the same. And, they were back on track.
And we're not going to do all the talking. Probably for the session, the later session today, we're going to have someone who was had a family member that was a guest talk about their experience from that angle, what it's like to be the family of someone who is fighting an addiction. And then we're going to have some talks from people who had actually gone through the program and can talk about it from that perspective as well. Because we don't want to bore you to death. I mean, Barnett and I can get on our soapbox. But,
Oh, yeah.
But another thing I just wanted to mention, because when I was writing down the list, there was a couple of mentions about AA and that type of thing. AA has worked and worked beautifully for many, many people over the years. And in our program, we never try. You notice I still own that program, even though I've
Yeah, that's
been
quite all
there
right.
for 6 months. It's still our program. But we would never try to attack AA or say anything negative to AA, because if people can go to AA and find sobriety, that's wonderful. But a lot of the people that would come to us would have gone to 12-step based programs multiple times and would have not been successful. And that's why they would look for something that was different. Did you have a question?
No, I just had asked when you said that if you were working there anymore.
Oh.
Because I'm sorry, but I came in a few minutes late.
Yeah, I left about 6 months ago, moved back to Tampa Bay. My daughter, Leona, lives there, and I actually live one house away from her now.
Very healthy relationship.
She says she's warmer over there.
Not codependent at all.
But a part of the thing that we had done, that we know that AA has actually done better than we have done, is to have meetings that are everywhere. Any town that you go to, if you need an AA meeting, you can usually look in the yellow pages or online or whatever, and you can find multiple places that you can go. And yet we were sending people out with no place to go. And our clients came from everywhere, from even outside the country.
Yep.
And from both coasts. And so how do you build a meeting for those people? So finally, it wasn't too long into the program that we decided to try an online meeting that we would have every week. Leona and I actually started the first meetings, and we had, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. What was his name that helped us get started? From
Ned Lewis.
Ned Lewis. Ned is in
Minneapolis.
St. Paul area, and he had started many different 3 principle-based support groups there. And so we asked him to help us out, help us get this thing off the ground, because we had no clue what we were doing. So we started it out, and it started very small. Sometimes we would have 2 or 3 people show up, and sometimes we'd have a really big turnout. There might be 4. And we kept going, and you know, it ran into some bumps. What are you going to do if somebody gets on the call and you can tell that they're completely out of it? You know, we had to learn how to kind of navigate those type things, but we kept going, and it ended up, now it's great. Now it's a wonderful group, and it could probably do without even having a trainer in place. The group is so strong and so supportive to each other. It's just an amazing thing. And another problem that we ran into with the program as a whole was that we were sending people home to their families, and we were sending them home speaking a language that the families didn't understand, because they go back with this 3 principle perspective, and they try to talk to their families, and they didn't even understand. So one of the things we added was an online group for family members. And these things were absolutely no cost added to the program or anything like that. And some of the families would participate, some wouldn't, but it was out there, it was offered. And then as our guests were leaving, we started adding on that they would get to work one-on-one with a 3 principal trainer. And we have some of the best, as far as I'm concerned, the best of the best, some of the old timers and some that have not been at it so long. But for those folks to have, I don't remember how much time
I think it was 2 originally, just 2 hours.
2 hours.
Now it's 4.
Now it's 4 hours. And most of our trainers will divide that into like half-hour sessions. So that means that somebody can leave the program and have 8 half-hour one-on-one sessions with a 3 principal trainer. And so we've just evolved. We've tried to see what's not working well and find a solution for it. So this has been just a brand new thing.
Having the insight is great. And having the insight is the wonderful first step. But, when a person goes home, those old conditioned ways start coming back. They just do. We're human, it's what happens. And if, we're not able to get a deeper understanding and continue being grounded, then it's really easy to lose sight. And, we all obviously are growing, And, that was a big problem that, a person would have an insight and, go home, have what I'd call a rehab high, And then once the rehab high left, things just started. It's always slow, and it's so slow we don't catch it until we're back in our conditioned thinking again. And so what the purpose of that, by giving them the 4 hours, they could develop a relationship with the 3 principal practitioner. And then hopefully with that relationship, then they would, start making appointments, and, obviously they have to pay for the appointments, but it would be worthwhile. They could see some value in it. And the people who, of course, these are the people that we know are doing well, okay? But the majority of them, stay in touch with the 3 principals practitioner. They go to Zoom meetings, they do those things, okay, to deepen the understanding. And it's so easy to get caught up, because you may have a meeting with your 3Ps practitioner, and let's say life's going great. And so you've already had a couple of meetings, and so your 3rd meeting, well, what's going on? Well, not much. May not be a whole lot to talk about at that time, who knows? And so then maybe the next one might be the same way. The next thing a person will fall off and quit going. And then down the road, they may run into some difficulties. But, it's important to stay grounded and stay, focused, if that's the right word, but to continue the grounding.
And a lot of people do just extremely well. That they don't relapse. They don't have issues. I saw a little thing on Facebook a few days ago that I had meant to copy and bring, but it was one of the ladies that had completed the program, and it was a mature lady. She was probably in her 50s maybe. And she was writing because it was the 1-year anniversary that she had left the program. And she was talking about how it was hard for her to believe that being at the lowest point in her life had brought her to the best part of her life. And that just blows me away. I've been around these principles for 15 years, and still, every time I see something like that happen, it just completely blows me away. That resiliency that's there, that wants to come through if given half a chance. And to get to witness that happening over and over again, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, it's, couldn't have done it without you, for sure. I mean, that's.
We got a mutual admiration.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
How are we for time? And did you have a question?
Yeah, I did.
I'm sorry.
I think you're doing okay. We're stopping at 3 and I think it's 2 something.
2:24. Okay.
Thanks. Do you have any research that you've done comparing your program to any other programs? And I'm very interested in the nuts and bolts, and maybe we could talk offline about, especially the environment right now where they're starting to not let people go into this type of work if they've gotten some sort of record. And so many of the people who are teaching are recovering themselves, and when you're recovering, you often have a record. So I'm just curious about the research and if you're having to deal with that other work.
The only research that I'm familiar with that Leona may know a little bit more than me, but I know Dr. Mark Howard had a research that was done, comparing the 12-step model and the 3 principles. But it's my understanding, I think it was in the same facility. And so each one of those groups, contaminated is not the right word, but maybe in a research.
So I'm asking about Gulf Breeze, no research at Gulf.
Okay. As far as Gulf Breeze, no research except for just basically
But unpublished
anecdotal,
stats.
if you
Yeah,
will.
We have statistics.
We have statistics,
Not published.
right. No third-party research. Okay, but we do have statistics, and it's self-reporting statistics.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's all we have to go by. But we don't have a research as far as comparing us to another 12-step institution. So many clients, with a certain amount of time frame, how many have done well, how many haven't. But once again, if you think about it, that's still self-reporting. And that's all you can go by, with this.
But there is other research that exists.
Right now I'm just asking about.
Our research
Yeah, I know yours.
compares other
Yeah.
interventions against 3 principles. It's got positive contamination as well, but there
Yeah.
are research that does that.
No,
Are you comfortable talking about the numbers, Barnett? Because I don't remember them.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I'm so comfortable with it.
Get my notes out.
And I want to get my notes up because I'm not a statistic remembering guy. But I do have them. So I thought maybe it might be something that got brought up.
Thought you had.
I do have them, yeah. I have them in order, believe it or not, till that happened. So I won't go through all of them. All right, so we'll talk about 2016. We had 115 total guests in 2016, 88 of whom communicated with us, okay? After they left. Stayed in communication with us after they left, which is a huge number, okay? I have been told that in the mid 30 percentile range is what you can expect for people to stay in communications. Now, that has a lot to do with Leona. Leona was the person who was in charge of that. 89% of those 88 reported as well, either with no relapse or relapsed and stopped shortly after. And so that's the criteria we used, okay? Those who they did have a slip, that they got back on track, okay? 64 guests, okay, 64 of our guests from 2015 were also followed into 2016, okay? Which means they had, a year or over a year, of sobriety. 84% of those reported as well. either no relapse or a sleep. So, that's the only data that we have, but it's convincing data. Is it scientific data? No, but it still speaks volumes, about what can be done using this model. And, like I say, we just continue to keep trying to improve and to make that number grow. But I think we can.
Are there other questions right now?
I have a comment.
Okay.
So I really like, I think Chris, right, mentioned having these after program, 3 principles groups proliferate as much as the 12-step programs. I really feel that that's very important. Because one of the things that you're talking about, I mean, even when Sid first had his epiphany, I guess, and he had groups of people that were around him almost constantly. And I myself personally, for 19 years, I mean, I still needed to come back to somebody and talk and get, to remember. I mean, the misunderstanding of the mind, we forget so easily. And then, and there's always someone who's remembered, and they're there to talk you back off the ledge, or just remind you of who you are spiritually. And I just can't say enough for the value of that, because we're all connected as human beings, and I think it's very important. And online is great. I think that's good, but I also would love to see it happen where people are eyeball to eyeball in the same room, feeling that connection, that energy. So I really applaud the idea of getting this out there. And look, it's got to start somewhere. It's got to start. 1 meeting, 2 meetings grows to a bunch. And as far as like the 12-step programs, I mean, they began by a man named Bill Wilson who had a spiritual awakening, and he passed it on to another human being, and that's how it happened. Now, whether it works for everybody or not, I mean, you have to give credit. Spiritual awakenings happen all throughout history and time, and we all have wisdom. It just, is it coming to the surface, and are we recognizing it? And some people lived a beautiful life and they never heard about the 3 principles. But, so I really, I would also like to see the meetings be like not necessarily just about addiction. I would like to see it that just human beings who are misunderstanding life are coming together to see that, oh, there's something that we're not seeing. And, we can all sort of help each other remember what it is. And, I think that simple idea could really, change everything. But it's just a matter of getting to that tipping point, where, and I believe me, I think there's enough people that are dissatisfied with what, is treatment and what's helping people that people are open for this. I just wanted to share that I'm hopeful that this is going to change, hopefully within our lifetime.
I think it is changing. Wow, that got a lot of responses. That's all hands go up everywhere.
Question. Yeah, so as I said earlier, I'm in recovery myself, and for about 3.5 years clean. And I did a 12-step treatment center, left, and then did the traditional 12-step model, so to speak. I've gotten to know the 3 principles over this past year, or the last several months, and that has definitely adapted to my program. I mean, it has not only improved my program, but has improved the way I see the current program I was already involved in. I believe either Kat or Barnett was talking about, how it's a new lens in which I see how it all works. And, you know, seeing the bigger picture in a different way. I think to be able to have that even after, you know, to have that spiritual awakening after getting clean and kind of having at least some sort of commitment to that, I think has benefited my life tremendously. And so I'm definitely a happy customer of the 3 principles, so to speak. And that's without even of any cost. I know that was another thing, is like, well, how is this going to be something that's on the street, every street corner at no cost? I mean, that was no cost. And that's just kind of having a desire to be more a part of that. And I would love to have that face-to-face meeting, and to kind of, the way I see it, is such a fundamental part. Like it is kind of like tucked itself underneath my program as a new part of my foundation. And as much as I would love to go into a typical meeting and share about it, it might just, you know, who knows how that would go? I don't know. So, so I don't. And I do share a lot of what I've learned with Kat, and I learned from her. And it's amazing. I mean, it's really something that, you know, I think it's such a huge community out there, and I think, you know, it does have to start somewhere, and I would totally be a huge advocate for that. How that will happen, who knows? But I definitely see it being a huge benefit in kind of going to the next level, you know, and seeing myself in a new light. And, you know, I just wanted to share that too.
I appreciate that very much. Let's see, I've got, just a second before
This is just from the audience.
Oh, okay. Just hold on for a second, please. Gina Wolf, who I worked with in Tampa Bay and who is one of our continuing ed providers now, had one of our guests that had graduated the program, and he had some legal issues that he had to deal with, and in dealing with those, he was required to go to 12-step meetings. And he wasn't happy about that because he came out of our program and he felt like that when he went to a 12-step meeting then that it was kind of going against what he had learned. So he and Gina started and took each step of the 12 steps, and her whole philosophy was let's look for the wisdom. And there's major wisdom in the 12 steps. So let's look for the wisdom in those 12 steps so you don't feel like you're fighting against something, that you can take what you've learned and go there and still build on that. So there are ways of, you know, you don't have to throw one out to have the other. So, and let's see, I think, Jacqueline, I think you were probably next.
Thank you. Just on that point, we definitely have people who do, you know, dual, and they end up in NA and AA meetings, looking for the wisdom in the other people and seeing that that's what it's all about. But my point was that it starts with us. Like we're the people. There's 20 people in this room. We can all start going to street corners, go to a cafe, start meeting with people one-to-one, just talking to people. Like we don't have to talk about it. We can just do it. Clumsily and making mistakes and falling over ourselves. But you know, what you've seen and what we've all seen in this room is worth sharing. So we can start that now.
Absolutely. Very good point. You had a question
from the audience. Can you share how you actually use 3Ps in your treatment program? I'd love to hear how they teach the 3 principles in order to help people deal with addiction. How does it practically apply? I'd love to hear about that. If you have a moment.
You know, I think that we'll go into that a little more in our next session when we actually have some of the folks that went through our program that can talk about it a little bit. But one of the things that I would hear repeatedly from our guests as they would be near the end of the program was, I can't believe that you don't talk about addiction more here. You know about addiction already. We don't have to teach you about addiction. Let's teach you about how to live a healthy life and where that's coming from. So, I mean, we covered things. We would cover relapse prevention and, those kind of things, and, how you can stay healthy and those kind of things. But the core of the program was teaching the 3 principles. And you don't do that a whole lot different regardless of whatever group you're in front of. When we were in the prison systems, we would teach it the same way that we taught it at Gulf Breeze, or if we were doing a business training, it was the same thing that we were teaching a business group. So it doesn't change a whole lot. When people begin to see their health, then they become healthy. And you don't have to do a lot, you're just pointing. They're the one that has to find it. You just point a direction. Yes, sir.
This isn't a question, if that's all right.
That's fine.
I'm having my own personal, I'm in a developmental state of having been into the 3 principles, understanding for about 4 or 5 years, and creating my own conflict with 12 steps in my own head about it, sort of. And, well, I haven't gone to a lot of 12-step meetings in the last 5 months or so. It used to be if I didn't go to a meeting, it was like I needed a fix. Like someone might tell me, a family member might suggest I go to a meeting because they can't stand being around me right now. But I'm so connected in this community, and I'm also so connected in a spiritual way. I can't say for sure, but I'm not having that like a meeting withdrawal thing. And this is not a criticism of any means about 12-step programs. But I have to find my way back into the meeting. It isn't like I've been leaving meetings and drifting off. I've been leaving meetings because I've had a spiritual shift in my own awakening. And I see, so many people struggling in and out of all kinds of meetings. But I believe, and I mean, talk about a shift or an insight. I took the wrong way here in East Coast traffic, so I could have driven to Alaska in the amount of time I spent in my car. And I went the gamut of emotions. And I came, and I was having some serious arguments with 12-step people in my head while I was driving, which wasn't a complete waste of time. But something welled up inside me that said, I'm getting close to something that I want to move on. It's really important to me. And how do, like the gentleman that's spoken to me, the main meeting this morning, about how he has a way of integrating the 3 principles into a structure in a clinical environment. He doesn't just go, hey, guess what? Everybody's putting 3 principles on all the doors. Take therapy off. Let's just put 3 principles on our doorways. But what I think I'm coming to, there's some people in the Minneapolis area that I run all of those with online that have some meetings. Some of their recovery meetings that just evolved into meetings. And I think that to have more 3 principles face-to-face in combination online meetings that might not be necessarily addiction-based. It would be kind of like this, hi, my name's Chris, I'm a human being. Because I've often felt like saying that at 12-step meetings, because we're all so special in 12-step meetings. I'm an alcoholic, and that means I do this. And I was thinking, way before I ever heard of the 3 principles, I go, we could just substitute human being there. I just knew that for my own truth. But I do think there's something I am going to move forward with somehow, probably not alone. And it doesn't contradict anything that's already going on, because I think it's really important when people go from living under a bridge into a meeting and they're like, would I be here if I was dead? I said to somebody earlier today. Our journeys that brought us here they can't be wrong. It got you here, whatever it was, you know. And we can look back with our new understanding and go and say, wow, that way doesn't make much sense. What got you here? Who knows? And until I get my time machine perfected, I'm working on it, where we can go back and do those things over, might as well just accept the past. But I do think there's a place in this world for these meetings, and they might not be labeled with any particular addiction. They just might be a Three Principles meeting. They might be community meetings. And if they help people with addiction of any kind, and they don't conflict with other recovery programs that are out there. But I do think I interact with so many people, as my mother would say, do not have a pot to piss in. And they live, you know, I'm not talking about Buffy at the country club that got a little carried away with cocaine and then developed a heroin addict and is now at a $80,000 recovery place. I'm talking about a person that on their best they're making minimum wage unless they're stealing things. And of course, we've heard the term opioid addiction. I've talked about, you know, we've all probably know people that have died. So anyway, so I was just thinking out loud that I know that there's something that's going to come up with this. I know that it seems to me, my world of the Three Principles, which is mostly online, because of my location, is like a bubble of 4,000 people that all market and talk to each other. And I think we're getting where we have to figure out how it unfolds more and hopefully, I mean, we can't, you know, force people to the Three Principles, but I think there's some way of integrating it into our life, as someone just said, and helping share it with other people in a non-intrusive way.
Right. And I think that groups like this that start sharing ideas is a great way for it to start. Because I don't know of a single Three Principle trainer that's out there, and I'm talking about the old timers that were there before me even. I don't know of a single one of them that said, you know, I learned the principles and then I just started teaching it and I knew what I was doing. Every person that I've ever talked to will say, I started talking about this and I didn't even really know what I was saying, but people started to hear something. So it doesn't take letters after your name. It doesn't take a certain amount of education. It takes an understanding that you're willing to share with somebody else. Very briefly, I'd like to tell you about an ex-coworker of Mark's and mine, Kimberly Porter, and Kimberly would not at all mind that I'm sharing her story. Kimberly went to prison 6 times, was it? 5 times? Five times she was in prison. It was her 5th time in prison when she heard the principles for the first time. She was this close to losing total custody of her children. They were already in the legal system and they were getting ready to just sever her parental rights completely. And she'd been writing letters to the judge on a weekly basis. Oh, please don't take my kids. I promise I'm never going to do it again. You know, this time's it. I'm going to do great. And she started going to the Three Principle classes, and something in her shifted. And she wrote a final letter to the judge. And she said, you know, I realize that you have my children's best interest at heart. And I hope that you don't take my children away from me, but if you do, I'm going to respect your decision because I know that you're doing what you think is right. And she mailed the letter. And she said that as soon as she dropped that letter, she thought, oh my God, what have I done? I've given my children away. But the judge called Kimberly in and told her basically, you're getting one more chance. I saw something different in that letter and I'm going to give you one more chance. But if you slip in any way, shape or form, those kids will be taken away forever. Kimberly finished her time in prison. She finished the Three Principle program, and the folks that were running the program at that time kind of took Kimberly under wing. they started allowing her to teach with them. Now, this is an ex-felon that's been convicted and sent to prison 5 times, and she's out teaching the principals. She didn't do it right all the time. She didn't always have the right words, but she had the heart. She had the heart that touched people when she spoke. So those of us that got to know her would want to choke her from time to time because Kimberly could be a pain in the butt when she wanted to. But I guess we all can if we are honest about it. That's been, I don't know how many years ago, 5, 6 years ago. I ended up leaving the program. Kimberly ended up leaving the program. We touched base from time to time. Kimberly called me last week. She had graduated with her bachelor's degree about a month ago. One of her sons is now a police officer. One of her sons is a fireman. Her 15-year-old daughter is spectacularly gorgeous and is just getting her driver's license. Kimberly just got her first job with her degree. I'm going to share this with a whole group of you. She got a job paying $63,000 a year. Wow. She's amazing. This is what understanding the 3 principles can do, folks. And you don't have to be rich to do it. Kimberly was far from rich. Kimberly has struggled. She had a husband who was not supportive in any way. She had 3 children to support. So she wasn't sent to an $80, and she had addictions. That's what had sent her to prison. So there can be light at the end of the darkest tunnel because Kimberly's was one of the darkest. Okay. So where are we at time-wise? I'm taking over.
No, that's all right.
It's 10 till 3.
10 till 3. Okay. Any other questions or any other short points we
I
want
just want to add something. Kimberly has like 5 children.
Yeah, exactly. The one she's estranged. She was estranged from.
She has
not
4.
anymore.
She had 4 kids that I had met, and then she has 1 older daughter. And I can just tell you that I was part of the first couple classes that she did, like working with her. And the thing is, she always used to say to me, "Oh, Mark, you've helped me so much, and this, and that." I would say, "Kimberly, no, it's the other way around. You don't really understand. It's you who's giving me more than I could ever give you." So.
She's an amazing gal, for sure.
Something came to me as you guys were talking, and then a couple other people were sharing about 12-step programs or really any other program. When you talked about people going home and having that rehab high and then relapsing and coming back to find it, and then I look at that next to the successes and then those that struggle in a traditional 12-step program. We teach the principles as a way to point people back to themselves. And I think sometimes through that habit of looking outside, we can confuse that by saying this good feeling that I found came from Gulf-Breeze recovery, or it came from the principles themselves, or it came from fill in the blank, and really innocently go back outside, which was the outside thing that was trying to point us back inside. And I think that when the 12 steps work really, really well, because I'm involved in that community as well, and those that I see that are truly, you can just see them at peace and serene and happy, and like a person can't fake that. Those are the people that have utilized the 12 steps as a way to turn back to themselves. And when I look at a 12-step program or the 3 principles or different religious texts, what is common throughout them seems to be what is true. And there's just so much truth in going back to yourself. And that seems to be what's really working for people. And if you take this avenue to get back to you or that avenue to get back to you, we're all pointing in the same direction, ultimately.
Absolutely. Very well said, Ken.
I just want to say I really, really need this.
think we all need it from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
It's the sharing that fills us all up. If nobody has any questions, I think this is a really good spot to just stop this for right now. And then we'll come back here at 5:30. And then you'll hear from some other folks other than us, and we'll continue the sharing. And you know, we want this to be a dialogue. We want to hear from you. So thank all of you that have been participating, and those of you that want to, please jump in at any time.